Well, thank you so much, Janet, and a belated happy birthday.
Thank you.
Well, you've spoken a little bit about turning 70 and starting to think about what's next. I just was interested in how you feel and how you feel about this stage of life.
Well, it's conflicting, actually, because I've always been open and honest about how old I am for various reasons, mostly maths, because if somebody started testing me when I was born, I'd get it wrong. And also because I think that's the least interesting part of starting a conversation most of the time. Nevertheless, I've just turned 70, and even if I didn't think that had an effect, it's the way people react to that. I think the minute you have a zero anywhere, people start recalibrating you, and it does make you think, okay, I haven't got that much longer left. There's a lot more behind than there is in front, and I should start thinking about that.
Okay. And what do you think about aging well? Do you think aging well has sort of changed over the last few years, either for yourself or for everybody?
Well, judging by Instagram, there seems to be a terrible obligation to get to 80 and still be able to do 15 headstands. And I'm here to say, no, you don't have to. I think aging well, and this is all personal, for me is two things. First of all, it's actually acknowledging where you are and not being overambitious for the things. You know, there are still things I want to do, of course there are, but I'm not going to get myself in a bit of a pickle by not being able to do stuff, setting myself too many ridiculous agendas. But I also think it's about just sort of living in the moment properly, because sometimes I'm going to feel more tired or I'm going to take more time to understand something. And I think you have to give yourself permission, really, to age well. Also, I think you have to stay a little bit scared of things. You have to do things that are daunting, because if your horizons meet you here, then you are making your world a bit too safe. But, you want to ring fence everything around you that makes that possible, which is why this campaign is such a good idea.
Oh, well, thank you. And actually, daunting is a good word, I think, isn't it? It's not just going bungee jumping in your later life. I think there's lots of admin, whether that's writing a will or a power of attorney. There's so much stuff that needs to be done, possibly. Yeah. And we're not very good at even thinking about life min or whatever that terrible expression is.
We're not. And also, John died 5 years ago now, so I'm still getting used to things I have to do on my own. I mean, I've got huge friends and family support. It would be silly, and obviously a therapy dog now. But it would be silly to pretend that I'm finding those sort of things any easier now. They're not. I need loads of help. And again, I think for me, admitting I need help with something used to be really hard, and now it's got much easier, because otherwise, again, daunting to face those things. But helping have someone solve the problem with you makes it far less big.
And when you talk about other people helping, you've got a very close-knit family. Yeah. How have you kind of approached having these conversations, and how do you have them?
Well, partly horribly realistically, actually, because I am the practical one saying, look, I'm 70 now. If I get another 15 years, we'll be doing well. And they all recoil. And I said, no, this is absolutely true. At the moment, I still want to stay in the house I'm in, but it may get more difficult. I love the fact that I've got friends and family around me. That may change. So I'm trying to stay open and flexible and still enjoy stuff. This is not... I think it's important to make the point that this is not a gloomy conversation. It's just, for me, it's just realistic. And if I'm gloomy about it privately, it doesn't feed into how I feel about spending time with them, because that would waste the time I've got. But I do think you have to address it, because, again, it's about that, making this problem smaller by getting in and sorting out the big stuff. And it really helps. Age space is such a good idea, because it just focuses on this time of my life. And this time of my life is here whether I like it or not. So I might as well adjust the spotlights and have a really good look.
Yeah. And is there anything you feel you haven't got around to talking about yet?
Well, probably only my funeral service. But okay. I veer between, something that's going to last possibly a week and something that will be equivalent to taking out the rubbish. So somewhere in between. But no, we're having an ongoing conversation about where I'm going to live, because, like I say, at the moment, I want to stay where I am, and I can manage the stairs. But I've got friends who are increasingly incapacitated or finding it all much more difficult. And I look at that and think, I'm going to get out before I have to be forced. I don't want this to feel as though it's happening around me. I want it to happen with me. Yeah. So that's why we have those conversations, because otherwise I'll be just a passive person in the middle of this without any agency, without having expressed how I want this to feel, what things I want to go where. And there's a lot of sorting there. There's a lot. So I have gently started it. I mean, this is not a dominant conversation for most people. And I don't think personally it should be a thing that you think, we'll have this conversation and then it's done. This is ongoing. This is happening all the time. This is about how you go on holiday, how you spend your time, definitely how you spend your money. And I don't think those can be an item on the agenda. I think they have to be holistic, really.
Yeah. And things change over time as well, actually. Absolutely. Situations change. Kind of like that,
really
in some ways.
They do, yeah.
So, but with a bit of planning ahead of time, hopefully everybody's a little bit more organised for if a fall happens, or things that don't necessarily need to completely knock you off your game either, actually.
And I think it makes the planning familiar too, because this always sounds sort of weedy, but I'm not very good with facts and figures, which is not a proud boast, but I'm okay with words, okay? So, it balances out. But because I'm not, that's the bit I've had to really force myself to address, because John took care of that. And increasingly, it'd be easy for me to find someone else, so I didn't ever have to bother my little head. But I kind of want to be now, because the more I know, the less I have to know. Does that make sense? I don't have to keep thinking about it if it has a slight air of familiarity. And I think that goes for forward planning. The more you know that you have in place, to me, the less scary it is.
Yep, and you can focus on all those other nice things.
Absolutely.
Travel, whatever it happens to be, family, holidays.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and I think the more it ticks away in the back of your mind as you don't do it, that's even worse, actually.
Yes,
I think,
some horrible sort of countdown of thinking, I should probably do this, and hopefully I'll be here in another couple of years and I can think about it then. But I think, and also I think it normalises it too for your family particularly, because, when my folks were around, the idea of them not being was awful, but my dad was a planner. So everything was kind of in place, and it was good for him. He really knew that would take care for us when he died, and it sure did. And he was very practical about it. It's all in here, it's all in the file, and he was good at that stuff. I mean, increasingly his life had got considerably smaller, because the last 2 years of his life he wasn't particularly fit, but he was still on it, and it was a life lesson in make sure you understand what's happening around you before you don't understand very much at all. Because for the people who are left, it's bliss for them to know what you want and when you want things to happen.
Definitely. Yes, my dad was very similar.
Was he?
He did leave his funeral service as well.
Yeah.
With optional hymns.
Optional. That would have been nice for my dad. I'm not going to say what we had to have, but we had to have it. Yeah.
It's really interesting. And I think particularly now where, we know the NHS is in a bit of a muddle and care is really expensive, and I think more and more families are taking on the responsibility of looking after parents, relatives, and whatnot. For people just beginning to think about this, and possibly rather less practical than you are, what would be your best advice of how to think about having these conversations?
I think, remember all the time, it's still you. Age doesn't redefine you. You don't. I was very disappointed when I was 10 that I didn't feel any different when I woke up. And that goes the same for any age that you hit. You're not suddenly blessed with some more insight, intuition, wisdom, whatever. And equally, you're not automatically deprived too. So I think it's important to remember you're making these decisions for the you that you are. And that's all the people you've ever been, we're the rings of a tree. And I don't know about you, but I constantly now get bombarded with those pictures of silver-haired people, living in places I don't particularly want to live, living the best life. And obviously there's a defibrillator on the wall of the gym now, but, there's still... And I think I'm not those people. I'm not those people. I'm a lot messier. I'm a lot less, I don't know. My take on life is different. So you are still you getting older. And I think that's where having these conversations is really helpful to me, because I'm having them. Yeah. I am having them as me, not as some imaginary version of myself, which would be quite easy to do. In 10 or 15 years' time, things will have changed around me. The world will be different too. So I want people to know who I am when I ask them for what I want.
And I think your family is very lucky that you've kind of started the conversations for kind of the adult children of people less willing again. I think that's becomes that's rather harder, I think, isn't it? I don't know
hard.
how to help younger people
It's really hard.
have that conversation with their mother.
Absolutely. And I would say in some ways it's never too early to start it. It can sometimes feel a bit too late, but it often isn't. So that there's no time pressure here, except that if you leave it any longer, it doesn't get easier. The questions don't get fewer. In fact, they probably get more. So start having those conversations, those 3 simple questions. Where do you want to live? How do you want to live? And who's going to pay for it? Just weave those into a conversation that you're having about all the other things in life. They're not going to be the most enjoyable highlight, and people will have lots of different opinions for you. But that's why I think it's so important to say, but this is me you're talking about. They may come up with things you hadn't thought of, and they'll be inspiring. And if you ever feel that, act on it. It's never too late to change things up, and it's entirely up to you to do that. But yeah, I mean, I suppose that we're open as a family about most things. So this feels like an extension of that. But I will say, this is not a conversation that we enjoy having as in, oh, good, it's time to talk about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't with John. It was really, really hard. Yeah. But on the other hand, I would rather have had it with him than not with him.
That's very, very sound advice. I think there might be really good music at your funeral. I think it'll be okay, and definitely some singing. Definitely some singing.
Yeah. Well, John left very clear instructions for his memorial, and it did include listening to music. But he also said very thoughtfully, print out the words of all the songs we're listening to, so that people have got something to look at. Otherwise, they'll just be gazing around the room. And I thought, that's smart.
That is really smart.
That is.
That's fantastic. And so what's next for you? What are your plans for the fun plans for the next?
The fun plans are to keep saying yes to things, but knowing that some of the things I've said yes to in the past, I'm going to say no in the future, especially as a widow. There are things that I've done because I thought I need to know how this feels, and they didn't feel very nice. So I don't have to do them again. Make the most of time, but not be time pressured to do that. Because again, I think when you start getting older, there is a sense of, well, if I don't do it now, and you think, well, if I don't do it now, it's done. There are loads of things I didn't do when I was 30 that I could only do then. It's all gone. But then that probably comes from my particular chemistry. I'm quite forward-facing, so I don't keep looking back and thinking, oh, if only. Apart from one particular pair of shoes in a sale, which I'm always going to regret not buying. But I think, and also it does change day to day. So don't put enormous pressure on yourself to feel comfortable with this conversation at any time. You don't have to keep having it on days when you don't feel up to it. It's personal.
It is. Thank you very much, Janet. It's been lovely to spend the morning with you.
Thanks for inviting me. And I think I might take this mug home. It's a very nice mug. Very nice dog.